Imagine a time when London's East End was ruled by men who operated in the shadows, men who pulled strings behind the scenes, men who decided the fates of others without making a scene themselves. One of these men was Freddie Foreman, a name that might not be as famous as the Kray twins, but was equally feared and respected in the criminal underworld. While the Krays thrived in the spotlight, Freddie preferred to keep a low profile, which in many ways made him even more dangerous. But who was this silent figure? How did he rise to power alongside the infamous Kray brothers? And what crimes did he commit that left such a dark stain on London's history? Today, we're diving into the life of Freddie Foreman, exploring his connections to the Kray Empire and the dangerous world he navigated with calculated precision. Freddie Foreman wasn't born into a life of crime. In fact, his early years were spent growing up in Battersea, South London, during a time when the city was still recovering from the devastation of World War II. Like many others in his neighbourhood, Freddie's family struggled to make ends meet. Poverty and hardship were daily realities, and Freddie quickly learned that if you wanted something, you had to take it. This tough environment moulded him, teaching him how to survive in a world that didn't offer many opportunities to honest men. By the time he was in his late teens, Freddie had found his way into the criminal world. He started small, committing petty thefts and robberies. But it wasn't long before his reputation for being calm under pressure and his willingness to do what needed to be done caught the attention of more powerful figures in London's underworld. It was through these early connections that Freddie eventually crossed paths with two men who were rapidly rising to the top of the East End's criminal hierarchy, Ronnie and Reggie Kray. Now, the Kray twins are household names. In the 1960s, they were the kings of the London underworld, running protection rackets, gambling dens and nightclubs, while rubbing elbows with celebrities and politicians. But what many people don't realise is that their empire wasn't just built on their own notoriety. It was built with the help of trusted men like Freddie Foreman. Freddie became an enforcer for the Krays, a role that went far beyond just using brute force. Freddie was known for his level-headedness and his ability to get things done without causing a scene. In the violent and often unpredictable world of organised crime, these traits were invaluable. Freddie wasn't the kind of man who craved attention, and that made him the perfect ally for the Krays. While they thrived in the spotlight, Freddie stayed behind the scenes, making sure the wheels of their operation turned smoothly. If debts needed to be collected, Freddie was there. If someone needed to be taught a lesson, Freddie handled it with swift precision. But it wasn't until 1967 that his loyalty to the Krays would be truly tested. One of the most notorious incidents in Freddie Foreman's criminal career was his involvement in the murder of Jack the Hat McVitie. Jack was a small-time crook who had fallen out with the Krays, particularly with Ronnie Kray, after botching an assassination job. To make matters worse, Jack owed the twins a significant sum of money. In October of 1967, the Krays decided that Jack had run out of time. He had become a liability, and in their world, liabilities were eliminated. McVitie was lured to a flat on Evering Road in Stoke Newington under false pretenses. There, Reggie Kray fatally stabbed Jack McVitie in the chest. But what happened after the murder is what truly solidified Freddie Foreman's reputation. Freddie wasn't involved in the actual killing, but it was his job to clean up the mess. According to reports and Freddie's own later admissions, he was the one who disposed of Jack's body. It's never been confirmed exactly how or where the body was dumped, but it was clear that Freddie had handled this sort of thing before. He had the connections, the know-how, and the cold resolve to ensure that McVitie would never be found. This wasn't just about getting rid of a body, it was about protecting the Kray Empire, keeping their secrets buried along with McVitie. But despite Freddie's efforts, the McVitie murder was a turning point. The Krays had managed to avoid serious legal trouble for years, but this murder was different. There were witnesses, loose ends, and, crucially, a growing interest from the police in taking down the twin brothers once and for all. In 1968, just a year after the murder, the Krays were arrested and put on trial for a string of crimes, including the murder of Jack McVitie. The trial was one of the most publicised criminal cases in British history, with both Ronnie and Reggie receiving life sentences for their roles in the killing. But the Krays weren't the only ones to go down. Freddie Foreman was also arrested and put on trial, not for the murder itself, but for his part in disposing of McVitie's body. In 1969, he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison for his involvement in the crime. While Freddie's connection to the Krays is perhaps the most famous part of his criminal career, it's not the only headline-grabbing moment. There's long been speculation about Freddie's involvement in another one of Britain's most notorious crimes, the Great Train Robbery of 1963. For those unfamiliar with the heist, it was one of the biggest in British history. A gang of thieves made off with £2.6 million, which would be worth over £50 million today. Although Freddie was never convicted for his role in the robbery, rumours swirled for years that he had played a part in helping some of the gang members after the heist, possibly providing safe houses or helping to launder the stolen money. Freddie himself has denied any direct involvement in the robbery, but the speculation only added to the mystique surrounding his life as a professional criminal. One who knew all the right people and had connections in every corner of the underworld. One of the most interesting aspects of Freddie Foreman's life is his adherence to a strict code of conduct. Unlike many criminals of his time, Freddie prided himself on being what he called a professional criminal. This meant that he saw his criminal activities as a business, one that required discipline, loyalty, and a certain level of respect. Freddie wasn't the kind of gangster who indulged in random violence or reckless behavior. Everything he did was calculated, and his actions were always tied to protecting the operations he was involved in. For him, there was an honor among thieves, and breaking that honor, whether by betraying a partner or causing unnecessary bloodshed, was simply bad for business. This mindset is part of what allowed Freddie to survive in the underworld for so long, even as many of his contemporaries were killed or imprisoned. In later years, after serving time for his crimes, Freddie became somewhat of a public figure. He wrote books, gave interviews, and reflected on his life in the criminal underworld. One of the recurring themes in his reflections is his view of the Krays. Freddie has often spoken about his respect for the twins, despite their violent tendencies. He admired their loyalty to family and their ability to rise to the top of London's criminal hierarchy. However, he also acknowledged that their downfall was largely due to their love of attention. The Krays loved the spotlight, and that, according to Freddie, made them reckless. Freddie, on the other hand, always preferred to operate in the shadows. He believed that the most successful criminals were the ones you never heard about, the ones who stayed out of the papers and away from the cameras. And in many ways, that's exactly what Freddie did for most of his life. Freddie Foreman may not be as famous as the Kray twins, but his impact on the London underworld was undeniable. He was the man who got things done, the one who made sure the Krays empire stayed intact, even when things went wrong. Whether it was disposing of a body or harboring criminals, Freddie played his part with cold precision. In the end, Freddie's story is a reminder that even the most powerful empires need men like him, men who work behind the scenes, away from the spotlight, but whose influence is felt in every decision made. Today, Freddie Foreman stands as one of the last remnants of a bygone era in British organised crime. An era where criminals had a code, loyalty mattered, and discretion was key. And for Freddie, that was the only way to survive.